The day I walked out of Oregon State Correctional Institution, the November rain was coming down so hard it felt like the sky was trying to wash me clean. I stood at the gate with a paper bag in my hands. Inside it, a phone with no charge, a wallet with $43 in it, and a watch my father had given me the day I turned 30. 9 years. 9 years behind those walls for a crime I did not commit. And the first thing I thought when that gate swung open was not about the rain or the cold or the $43 or the dead phone. The first thing I thought was, Dennis has no idea what is coming, because I had not spent 9 years grieving. I had not spent 9 years being angry. I had not wasted a single day of my sentence on bitterness. I had spent 9 years building a case, and on the day I walked out of that prison, every piece of it was ready. My name is Frank Callahan. I am 64 years old. I built Callahan Freight Solutions from a single truck and a rented warehouse in Portland into a $42 million logistics company that moved goods across 11 western states. I had 400 employees who called me by my first name. I had a daughter named Lauren who was my whole reason for getting up every morning. I had a wife named Carol who I thought loved me, and I had a business partner named Dennis Hartley who I trusted more than any man alive. Every single one of those things turned out to be something other than what I believed, but we will get to that. First, let me tell you how a man goes from $42 million to $43 in a paper bag. The tax fraud charges came in the spring of 2015. The IRS arrived at my office with federal agents and a stack of documents that made my stomach drop before I even knew what I was looking at. Shell companies I had never heard of, offshore accounts opened in my name, invoices for services that were never rendered, payments to vendors that did not exist. And then, the moment I will never stop seeing clearly, my accountant of 11 years stood in my own conference room and told federal investigators that I had personally instructed him to falsify the records. He said it with a straight face. I sat across the table from him, and I could not speak. Not because I was guilty, because I was so far from guilty that I did not yet have a framework for understanding what I was watching. My criminal defense attorney called it one of the most thorough financial fraud setups he had encountered in 30 years of practice. The evidence was immaculate. Every document, every account, every transaction led directly to me. The jury saw a wealthy man who had gotten greedy. They gave me 12 years. I served 9 with good behavior. Carol came to visitation twice in the first year. She cried both times. She told me she was fighting for me, that she knew I was innocent, that she would wait. The divorce papers arrived 14 months into my sentence. She wrote a short letter saying she could not put her life on hold, that she had found someone who could be present in ways that I could not. I later found out that someone was Dennis. That part did not surprise me. By then very little could. What broke me was Lauren. My daughter was 27 when I went to prison. She was a marketing manager at a tech startup in Portland, making a good living, happy, engaged to a man named Tom who I genuinely liked. She had built herself a real future. When the charges came, the company Dennis now ran alone terminated a consulting contract with Lauren's firm, citing conflict of interest. Her firm let her go. Tom's family pressured him to distance himself from the daughter of a convicted felon. The engagement ended. She spent 3 years trying to rebuild, then moved to Tacoma to start over somewhere nobody knew her last name. I did not find out any of this from Lauren directly. She wrote to me faithfully for the first 2 years. Cheerful letters I now realize were carefully constructed to protect me from the full weight of what was happening to her. Then the letters got shorter, less detail, then they stopped entirely. I called. She answered sometimes. She always said she was fine. She was not fine. And I was powerless behind those walls to do anything about it. What I did not know at the time, what I would only learn after I got out, was that Lauren had a son, my grandson Marcus, born 3 years into my sentence. His father left when Marcus was 18 months old. Lauren was raising him alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Tacoma, working as an office manager at a dental practice. She drove a car with 200,000 miles on it. She clipped coupons. My daughter, who had grown up in a 4,000-square-foot house in Lake Oswego, was clipping coupons to feed my grandson. while Dennis Hartley was living in that house. He had married Carol. He was running the company I had built, calling himself the founder in press interviews, sitting in my chair at the head of the conference table, parking in the space that had my name on it, a name he had simply replaced with his own. I found all of this out through a man named Ray Decker. I hired Ray with the last of the money I had held in a small savings account that Dennis had somehow missed when he was dismantling my life. Ray was 61, a former Portland detective who had left the force after a moral objection to watching the wrong man get convicted. When I called him from a prison payphone and explained my situation, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I know your case. I always thought something was off about it." That was enough for me. What Ray found over the following months turned everything I thought I knew into a new and uglier picture. Dennis had been stealing from the company for 4 years before the charges came, small amounts at first, then larger ones as his confidence grew. When the internal discrepancies were about to be flagged by my financial controller, Dennis made a decision. He and Carol, who had been involved for at least 2 years before my arrest, brought in a man named Steve Molina, a forensic accountant with a history of doing clean work for dirty clients. Steve did not just hide Dennis's theft, he redirected it. Every fraudulent transaction was reattributed to me. Accounts were opened in my name using documents Carol had access to. Invoices were backdated. My signature appeared on authorization forms I had never touched. The IRS investigation that followed had no reason to look anywhere else. The evidence was immaculate, and it all pointed directly at me. Ray laid everything out for me at a diner near the bus station during my first week out. He slid a folder across the table and let me read while my coffee went cold. Then I asked about Steve Molina. Ray said Steve was in a difficult position. He had done what Dennis paid him to do and had been compensated well, but the compensation had dried up. Dennis cut him off once the conviction came through. Steve had moved to Boise. He was working small accounting jobs, and he was carrying the kind of guilt that expresses itself as chronic insomnia and too much whiskey on weeknights. Ray had spoken to him informally, just a conversation. Steve had not denied anything. He had simply stared out the window and said, he supposed something like this would catch up to him eventually. I said, "Desperate men make the worst decisions." Ray nodded, "But they make the best witnesses." Before I tell you what happened next, I need to stop for a second. If this story is hitting you the way it hit me when I lived it, hit the like button right now. It helps more people find stories like this one. And subscribe if you are not already here. We release a new true story every single week. Now drop a comment and tell me something. Have you ever trusted someone completely and found out too late that they were using that trust against you? Tell me. I will be reading every single one. Because the next part of this story is where 9 years of patience finally became 9 years of power. I spent 3 weeks watching before I made any move. I did not contact Dennis. I did not drive past the house. I did not let any former employee or associate know I was back. I had learned in 9 years that patience is a sharper instrument than anger, and I intended to use it carefully. I went to see Lauren first. She opened the door of her Tacoma apartment on a Tuesday evening and looked at me for a full 5 seconds before she said anything. She had her mother's eyes, but she had my stubbornness in the set of her jaw, and I could see 9 years mapped onto her face in ways that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with carrying weight alone for too long. "Dad," she said, and then her voice gave out entirely. We sat at her kitchen table for 3 hours. Marcus was doing homework in the next room. Every few minutes I could hear him shifting in his chair or humming something quietly to himself. She told me everything she had held back from the letters, the lost job, the broken engagement, the years of starting over, the difficulty of explaining to a small boy why his mother cried sometimes when she thought he was asleep. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. "Because you were in there and I was out here and there was nothing either of us could do about any of it. What would knowing have helped?" I did not have an answer for that. What I had instead was purpose. I told her I had not spent 9 years doing nothing. I told her I had built something in that prison that had no square footage and no company registration, but was nonetheless real. A case, a plan, a framework for taking back everything that had been stolen. She looked at me the way Lauren has always looked at me when she thinks I am underestimating the problem. Dad, Dennis has money and lawyers and 9 more years of entrenching himself. We have a rented apartment and a car that needs a new alternator. We have the truth, I said. And we have something he does not know about. She raised an eyebrow. What? Me? He thinks I am a broken old man coming home to nothing. He thinks the best I can do is be angry. He does not know what I have been preparing. She was quiet for a moment. Then she called into the next room. Marcus, come out here. There is someone I want you to meet. My grandson walked into the kitchen with a pencil behind his ear and a math worksheet in his hand. He was 6 years old, small for his age, with Lauren's eyes and what I would later recognize as my own way of holding very still when he was thinking something through. He looked at me with the frank assessment that small children apply to strangers before trust has been established. This is your grandfather, Lauren said. He studied me. You were in prison, he said. Not an accusation, just a fact he was locating in the right file. I was, I said. I didn't do what they said I did. He thought about that for a moment. Like wrongful conviction, he said. We learned about that, exactly like that. He nodded, satisfied, and climbed into the chair beside me as if we had known each other for years. Show me what you're working on, I said, and pointed at the worksheet. He spread it out on the table between us. That was the moment I understood exactly what I was fighting for. Finding Steve Molina took 1 week. Ray had his address in Boise and a rough schedule of his movements. I drove down on a Thursday, alone, and found him at a coffee shop he used as a makeshift office on weekday mornings. He was smaller than I expected, mid-50s, thinning hair, the careful stillness of a man who spends a lot of time trying not to look like what he is. I sat down across from him without asking permission. He looked up from his laptop. His face went through several changes in rapid successions: recognition, fear, then something close to relief, which surprised me. "Mr. Callahan," he said. "That's right. How did you find me? Does it matter?" He closed the laptop. His hands were not steady. "I figured you would find me eventually. After you got out, I have been thinking about what I would say." I leaned forward. "Then say it." What Steve told me over the next 90 minutes filled in every gap Ray had left open. Dennis had approached him in late 2014 through a mutual contact. The offer was simple: restructure the records, make the trail lead to me, get paid, stay quiet. Steve had told himself at the time that I was probably guilty of something anyway, that wealthy businessmen always had dirty corners, that he was just doing a technical job. He had believed that for about 6 months. Then I went to prison. Lauren lost her job. He saw an article about my daughter, and he had not slept more than 4 hours at a stretch since. "I need to know if you will sign a statement," I said. "A full accounting of what was done, how it was done, what Dennis told you, and what you were paid." "If I do that," he said, "Dennis will come after me." "Dennis is going to be in no position to come after anyone." He was quiet. "What do I get?" I looked at him steadily. "You get to stop carrying this. You get to look at yourself in the mirror. Beyond that, I will speak with the federal prosecutor about your cooperation, and that conversation will include the fact that you came forward voluntarily with complete information." I leaned in slightly. "I cannot promise what they will do. I can promise that staying silent will be worse for you than talking, because I am going to bring this entire thing down with or without you, and I would rather you be on the right side of it when it lands." He stared out the window at the street for a long time. Then he said, "I have it all. I kept copies of everything. The original documents, the account structures, my communications with Dennis, all of it. I told myself it was insurance. I did not let my expression change. Bring it to me," I said. "I need to stop right here for 1 second. Because what happened next, what I did with what Steve gave me, and what I said when I finally sat across from Dennis in my own living room, is the part of this story that I want you to see clearly. Drop a comment right now. Do you think Dennis believed I would come back for him? Or did he think 9 years had finished me? I want to know. Tell me. And if you know someone who is fighting something like this right now, someone who has been wronged and is running out of patience, share this with them, because what comes next is for them." I drove back from Boise with a folder in my passenger seat that was worth more than everything I owned. Ray and I spent 2 weeks organizing what we had. Steve's signed statement, the original documents he had used to restructure the records. A second forensic accountant who reviewed everything and provided a signed professional opinion that the original records had been deliberately altered. And then, the piece that changed everything, a digital forensics specialist who recovered email threads between Dennis and Steve from an account Dennis had believed was closed and permanently wiped. The threads were detailed, they were damning, they contained his exact words, instructions, payment amounts, dates, the agreement to stay quiet laid out in writing by a man arrogant enough to believe he would never have to explain himself. When I was ready, I called Dennis. He picked up on the third ring. His voice had the smooth, settled quality of a man who had been comfortable for a long time and expected to remain so. He said my name with the careful warmth of someone managing a situation rather than greeting a person. "Frank, I heard you were out. How are you doing?" "I am doing very well," I said. "I would like to come by the house and talk. There are some things we need to discuss." A pause. "The house in Lake Oswego? That is the one. Sunday morning, 9 o'clock. A longer pause. "Frank, I don't think that is a great idea. Carol is—" "Tell Carol the first I'm coming," I said. "I will see you Sunday." I did not wait for his answer. I hung up. Sunday morning I drove to Lake Oswego in a car Ray had lent me, wearing clothes that were decent but not impressive. I had thought carefully about this. I did not want to look like a man who had arrived with resources. I wanted Dennis to see what he believed he had created. Someone diminished, someone manageable. The door to my house opened before I reached the steps. Carol stood in the doorway. 15 years of marriage and 9 years of absence had produced a version of her I recognized structurally but not essentially. She was wearing Dennis's expression, that practiced composure of people who have told a lie for so long they have stopped distinguishing it from truth. "Walter," she said. She caught herself. "Frank, hello." "Carol." The living room had been redecorated twice. The furniture I had chosen was gone. The photographs of our family were gone. There were neutral prints on the walls, the kind that cost money but say nothing. Dennis was standing near the fireplace with the posture of a man in his own territory. He was heavier than I remembered, wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than the car I had arrived in. He extended his hand. "Frank, it is good to see you." I did not take the hand. I sat down in the chair nearest the door and waited. His arm dropped. He sat across from me. Carol remained near the hall as if she had not yet decided whether to stay or go. "I understand you have had a difficult time," Dennis said. "And I want you to know, whatever hard feelings you might have." "I do not have hard feelings," I said. "I have evidence." The room went quiet in a particular way. The way rooms only go quiet when everyone in them has suddenly stopped pretending. "I have Steve Molina's signed statement. I have the original documents he used to restructure the records. I have your emails to him, Dennis, the ones you thought were deleted, the ones where you lay out the entire plan in writing because you were arrogant enough to believe you would never have to explain yourself." I looked at him steadily. "I have a forensic accountant's opinion, a digital recovery specialist report, and enough documentation to interest a federal prosecutor considerably." Dennis's face was doing something complicated. Carol had gone entirely still. "You set me up," I said. "Not because I did anything wrong, because you had been stealing and you needed somewhere to put it, because you wanted the company and my wife and my house, and I was the most convenient solution to all of those problems at once. I let that land. You destroyed my daughter's life. You cost my grandson a grandfather for the first 6 years of his life, and you did it without losing a single night of sleep in this house that you did not build and do not deserve." Dennis found his voice. "Whatever you think you have." I pressed play. Steve's voice filled the room. Clear and level, recorded at the Boise coffee shop with a device Ray had helped me set up. Steve accounting for every step, in specific language, the shell companies, the offshore structures, the signature forgeries, Dennis's instructions repeated back with the payment amounts and dates, and the full agreement to stay silent. I let it run for 4 minutes. Then I turned it off. The room was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator running in the kitchen. Dennis looked at Carol. She looked back at him. Whatever had held them together in this house all these years, it was not love. I could see that clearly now. It was complicity. Two people bound by a shared choice that could not be undone. They were looking at each other the way people look at each other when the thing they built together is finally coming apart. "What do you want?" Dennis said. His voice had lost its polish entirely. It sounded like what it was, a man who had just watched his exits disappear. "I want the company," I said. "I want this house. I want every asset acquired using resources taken from me during my incarceration. I want a full written confession and your complete cooperation with the federal investigation that is going to follow this conversation regardless of what you decide in the next few minutes." I looked at Carol. "I want you to sign a statement acknowledging your prior knowledge of the fraud. And I want both of you to understand that my daughter and my grandson are going to be made whole, financially and in every other way I can arrange." "That is insane," Dennis said. His voice was stripped bare now. "You cannot prove—" "I can prove everything," I said. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I have been inside a prison cell for 9 years, Dennis. I did not spend that time grieving. I spent it planning. You had every advantage. All I had was time. I used it more carefully than you used your advantages." Carol spoke for the first time, flat. "Stripped of everything I used to associate with her. What happens to me?" I looked at her for a moment. I felt something, but it was not what I expected. It was quieter than that, a kind of finished sadness. The way you feel when you have finally put down a weight and realize how long you were carrying it. "You cooperate with prosecutors," I said. "You sign the statements my lawyers put in front of you. You tell the truth and you tell it completely. In exchange, I will not advocate for your prosecution, but if you withhold anything, if you complicate this in any way, I will make sure every detail of what you knew and when you knew it is on the public record." She nodded once. She did not look at Dennis again. The negotiation took 11 days. Dennis's lawyers made the expected threats, statutes of limitations, questions about admissibility, a defamation countersuit everyone in the room knew was a bluff. I sat through all of it without raising my voice once. I had said everything I needed to say on Sunday morning in my living room. The rest was paperwork. Dennis pleaded guilty to federal tax fraud, conspiracy, and financial forgery. He received a sentence of 10 years with the possibility of parole after 7. Carol signed her statements. She avoided criminal charges in exchange for complete cooperation. She moved to her sister's house in Phoenix. We have not spoken since. Steve Molina received a suspended sentence of 18 months with 3 years of probation and a permanent prohibition from financial services. He gave his complete cooperation. When it was over, he sent me a handwritten letter. I did not read it for 2 weeks. When I finally did, it was 4 paragraphs long and ended with this: "I know this does not fix what I helped take from you. I am sorry. It is not enough. But it is everything I have to give." I put the letter in a drawer and left it there. The company was in worse shape than it looked from the outside. Dennis had prioritized the appearance of profitability over actual operational health. Client relationships had eroded. Key contracts had not been renewed. 2 distribution centers were running below capacity. The board reconstituted itself quickly once it became clear which direction things were going. There were 4 genuine members who had been there when I ran the company and had privately never been comfortable with the narrative of my guilt. The rebuilding took longer than the justice, but it began. Lauren came back to Portland. Not to the company immediately, that was her choice and I respected it. But she came back to the city, found an apartment she liked, enrolled Marcus in a school with a good art program because he had turned out to have his grandmother's eye for color and proportion. Marcus and I established a routine. Saturday mornings at a diner 2 blocks from his school, where he told me about his week and I told him stories about his mother growing up and about his great-grandfather who had built a business from nothing and left it to people who turned out to have different definitions of the word deserve. Marcus listened to those stories with the same still attention he had given his math worksheet the first night we met. One evening about 8 months after I moved back into the house, I was sitting on the back porch watching the October light do what Oregon light does in the fall, turning everything it touches the color of old gold. Inside, Marcus was helping Lauren set the table for dinner. I could hear them arguing cheerfully about whether forks go on the left or the right, Lauren laughing when Marcus declared that forks should go wherever makes the most sense geometrically. I thought about Dennis in a federal facility, sitting with the particular boredom of a man who believed his intelligence would protect him from consequences and found out too late that it would not. Lauren had asked me, 2 weeks after Dennis signed his plea agreement, whether I had ever considered that the hatred might have done more damage to me than the 9 years. I had thought about it for 3 days before I answered. What I had felt was not hatred. Hatred is formless and corrosive. What I had felt was precision, a decision to be more careful than my enemy, a commitment to work longer, wait longer, document everything, speak quietly, and keep my face still until the moment was right. That is not hatred. That is what it looks like when a man refuses to let the worst thing that happened to him become the only thing that defines him. Lauren looked at me for a moment and said, "Dad, you are going to need to work on being a little less intense when Marcus's teachers call." I told her I would try. If you are watching this and you are carrying something like what I carried, a wrong done to you by someone who counted on your trust to make their betrayal easier, I want you to hear this directly. The people who hurt you believed they had calculated the full cost of what they were doing. They had not. They had not calculated patience. They had not calculated the specific quality of purpose that comes from having nothing left to lose and everything left to prove. They had not calculated what a person will do when they decide that their story is not finished yet. Dennis thought I was a broken old man. He was wrong about the broken part. He was wrong about the old part too. My name is Frank Callahan. I owned a $42 million company and a house in Lake Oswego and a life I had built from scratch. A man I called my partner took all of it while I was not looking. I spent 9 years in a cell that was not meant for an innocent man. I came out with $43 and a dead phone and one complete and fully documented plan. I got my house back. I got my company back. I got my name back. And more than any of that, I got every Saturday morning at a diner with a boy who has my stubbornness and his grandmother's eye for color and a very firm opinion about fork placement that I would not argue with for anything in the world. The people who tried to erase me are gone. I am still here. Keep fighting. Document everything. Be more patient than your enemy, and believe that the truth surfaces eventually, no matter how deep someone tries to bury it. If this story meant something to you, hit the like button. It costs you nothing, and it helps this channel reach more people who need to hear it. Subscribe if you are not already here. A new true story every single week, and in the comments, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? Someone who used your trust as a weapon against you? Tell me your story. I read every comment, every single one. I will see you in the next story.